In order to reason with properties from algebra, we first need to review the properties. The properties of equality keep equality. If two things are equal to each other, then I can add the same thing to both sides of my equation and keep equality. Similarly, with the subtraction property, if two things are equal to each other, then I can subtract the same thing from both sides of my equation and keep equality. The multiplication property says if two things are equal, I can multiply both sides of the equation by the same thing and keep equality. And finally, the division property says if two things are equal, I can divide both sides of the equation by the same thing and keep equality. You've used these properties in algebra to solve for x. There are a few more properties that we need to cover. The reflexive property says anything is equal to itself. Right now, this doesn't seem too useful, but it will be later on when we write proofs. The symmetric property says if two things are equal, then it doesn't matter what order I write them around the equation. If A equals B, then B equals A. Symmetric means left and right are the same. If you look at it this way, left equals right, right equals left. I can switch around an equal sign. The transitive property allows me to combine more than one equation. If A equals B and B equals C, I can link those two equations together. Well, if A equals B and B equals C, I can transit through B to conclude that A equals C. And the substitution property. If we know that A equals B, then A may be replaced with B in any other equation. You've used the substitution property many times when you know the value of x and you plug it into another equation and solve. The properties of adding and multiplying. Closure. If we add two numbers together, for an answer, we're going to get a number. It seems kind of useless right now, but if we add two numbers, we should get a number for an answer. That makes sense. Just like if we add two angles, we're going to get an angle for an answer. If we add two line segments, we're going to get a line segment for an answer. If we add two numbers, we should get a number for an answer. Same with multiplying. If we multiply two numbers together, we should get a real number. Now, not all operations are closed. There are some operations that are not closed. You'll learn about those in Algebra 2. The commutative property says if I add two numbers, it doesn't matter what order I add. I can take A plus B and get an answer, and it's going to be the same answer. It's going to be equal to taking B plus A. 3 plus 4 is 7. 4 plus 3 is also 7, and 7 equals 7. I can do the same thing with multiplication. I can change the order in which I multiply. 2 times 3 is the same as 3 times 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 2 is 6, and 6 equals 6. Be careful, the commutative property is not the symmetric property. In the symmetric property, I'm changing around an equal sign. My entire left side and my entire right side are switching. In the commutative property, I'm switching order, but I'm switching around an addition sign or a multiplication sign. The associative property says the order in which I add three numbers doesn't matter. If I take a plus b first, because it's in parentheses, and get that answer and add c, I'm going to get the same answer as if I take b plus c, get that answer, and add a to that answer. As long as I have addition all the way across, I can change my association. Same with multiplication. If I have multiplication all the way across, I can change the order in which I multiply. The order of operations says on the left side I'm going to take a times b first, get that answer times c, and on the right side I'm going to take b times c and take a times that answer. The identity property says if I start with any number and I add something and I get a back for an answer, I can use the identity property. So the question is, what is this something? What is the identity for adding? Well, the identity for adding is 0. Anything plus 0 will get me that anything back for an answer. In multiplication, when I start with a number, when I start with anything, and I multiply by something, to get that something back, I need to multiply by the identity. In multiplication, the identity is 1. So the additive identity is 0, and the multiplicative identity is 1. The inverse property starts out kind of like the identity property, where I'm going to start with a, I'm going to add something, but this time for an answer, I want to get my identity. So what do I have to add to a to get 0? Well, in addition, I'm going to have to add negative a. A and negative a are opposite. One's positive and one's negative. Now, if a was negative to begin with, the opposite of a negative number is positive. So the way I've done this problem, it doesn't matter if a is positive or negative, the opposite of that will be the other one. In multiplication, again, I'm going to start with a, multiply by something, and instead of getting a for an answer, I want to get 1 for an answer. A times something is going to give me the identity 1. Well, in multiplication, it's going to be 1 over a. And 1 over a is the reciprocal. So the opposite is the additive inverse, and the reciprocal is the multiplicative inverse. And finally, the distributive property. If you notice, the line between addition and subtraction has been taken away for the distributive property, because the distributive property allows me to multiply and add at the same time. If I were to follow the order of operations, I would take b plus c and take a times that answer. Well, the distributive property says, you know what, I can do this problem another way. I can keep my plus sign, and I can distribute a times b and a times c. And as long as I do this math correctly, I'm going to get the same answer on both sides of the equal sign. So I can either add first and then multiply, or I can multiply and then add. There is another form of the distributive property with the a on the right side of the parentheses. Here a is on the left side, it stays on the left side. I can distribute from the right side also. Again, I'm going to keep my plus sign, and I'm going to take b times a, and I'm going to take C times A. I'm going to do that math first and add those numbers together. And I'll get the same answer if I took B plus C, got that answer, times A. The distributive property says I can do my math either way and keep equivalence.